Here we are in Eastway Park. I first discovered this neighborhood out running. I used to run back here back about 10 years ago. It was near enough to Plaza Midwood and Commonwealth that I could run to it. So I always enjoyed it. The hills rolled nicely, and I always thought the architecture was interesting to admire. So here we are walking around. It's a short video, I'd like to think. I could have spent more time just exploring. The plan is to comment on some of the architecture and see what else comes up along the way. I like that fieldstone in the front. Now this neighborhood is outside of the, I guess it's like the 5,000 meter belt line. So that's like the Eastway, Tyvola, Sugar Creek, I-85, Billy Graham Circle. Oh, look at that building. I love that. That low slung brick on the bottom, a little engineering material on the top. These mid-centuries, they're from another era for sure. But being in Charlotte, I've had the opportunity to be inside enough of them now at this point that I do appreciate what they have to offer, which is a lot of glass, hardwood floors typically. They usually have a very distinct odor, almost musty, from probably years of HVAC. Just usage, really. But there you see, there's lots of glass in the front, big picture window. They've done a good job protecting that with all kinds of mature trees, which must do an excellent job at keeping the power bills down. It's really good for the environment too. And look at this piece. Big brick wall, all kinds of glass. I'm guessing those are bedrooms in the front. So in the back then there must be just a great family room, maybe with a sliding glass door out into a backyard. Who knows? It's probably a nice sanctuary. And back in the day, this would have been the edge of town when they built this. And gosh, I'm assuming the mid-50s. Nothing beyond here but hopes and dreams. Nowadays, things have changed pretty dramatically. This is, I wouldn't call it an inner neighborhood, but the neighborhood itself, oh, look at this building, this one. They have the carport and the fieldstone on the front with that fun glass. So this neighborhood is interesting because it is it's sort of a twin neighborhood. It was one that was built a little bit later called, I think it's Wintergreen Park. Wintergreen's on Central, or Sheffield Park. That's on Central Avenue. And then Eastway Park is closer to Independence. And both of those major arteries have been selected by the Charlotte area for rapid transit improvements. And they're still sort of working out the details. And they've been working out the details, frankly, since before I moved here on Independence, as to the mode, where the stops will be. But this neighborhood here is going to be no more than a half-mile or a kilometer walk from one of two rapid transit lines, potentially. So I really just wanted to come out and document it for the record, for the future, before sort of, if development comes, it changes. And I'll get more into that as we get to the denser lots closer to Independence later in the walk. But oh my goodness, look at this one right here. This thing looks like it was dropped out of a spaceship, powered by jets. That's right. And it's just so futuristic looking. And it's unbridled optimism is what it is. What that is there's going to be fusion power before we know it, and energy bills are a thing of the past. So let's just focus on building the highest quality, most optimistic architecture possible so that we can enjoy our lives. And that's what those people did in the 50s. They drove their body on frame vehicles down to the manufacturing plant. At the time, Charlotte was a very, very heavy manufacturing city. It sort of lost to time. So when this neighborhood was built, I think Charlotte had about 250,000 people, maybe even less. It wasn't a banking hub. There were banks here, but finance in general was still very tightly controlled. There were only maybe a generation out since the Panic of 29, 28, and the regulation that subsequently followed. So banking wasn't big business. What was the big business in Charlotte was cotton. They made textiles. There were all kinds of former textile mills. They also made a lot of industrial parts. There was an old manufacturing facility where they made cars and then later missiles. And nowadays it's a place where you can go and buy a drink and then walk to another bar with the same drink, which is pretty cool. So this is a nice example of mid-century, but then I think we're going to turn around and we're going to see one that really jumps out at me, if for no other reason than we're just so close to it. I got a good shot of it, but great picture window on the left. Love the chimney. Look at those 3 parallel line windows. Those look great. Really well set with the shrubbery. And crossing the property line, we have another great example of an L ranch with that sort of 50s blue, 50s door. Look at those 4 horizontal lines. That's just a nice nod, I think, to any part of the country that was making ranches in the 50s. It's so funny. So where I come from, which is the Northeast, this sort of deindustrialized Northeast, all the neighborhoods that were built in the 50s were around sort of unfortunate towns. They had a manufacturing base still in the 50s, so there was development happening around them. But by the end of the 60s, it was all gone. And by the time I was a kid, they had sort of been neglected for a generation or two. So you just drive as fast as you could through these ranch towns. But in Charlotte, they were preserved, kind of. They certainly were driven quickly through, but I think because of the renaissance of Charlotte and the growth of banking and the wake of Graham Leach Blaley in 99 or 2000, it's just a unique opportunity to sort of take a snapshot of that sort of history. So here we're turning, I think we're still in Eastway Park. We might be in Sheffield Park. And Sheffield Park is an interesting park. If you ever get the time to take the kids there, I say go for it. They have some neat slides, unique attractions. I brought my family there a few times. It's a nice park. But one of the unique features they have there is an old wagon road. So around the turn of the 20th century, I think where we are now was actually outside of the old Charlotte Township. I don't recall the exact name, but there was a wagon road that led to Charlotte, and folks bringing in their agricultural wares, I'm assuming, from wherever. Or maybe they were, who knows what they were doing. Maybe they were bringing in mining equipment. All kinds of stuff went on in uptown Charlotte. But there's a wagon road. It's preserved. Oh, wow, look at the peak on this. It's like a proto-spit level. It's still a ranch, but it has a gabled front that's nice and flat, very, very subtle, very understated, very classic. With that blue door, what nice lines. That's the type of home you could pull your Cadillac or Lincoln into and just feel proud of all the hard work and contribution, and thankful, frankly, that the hard times, the brother can you spare a dime times, which were still etched in these folks' memory, maybe as children, were over. But looking at these lawns, clearly the neighborhood's been very well maintained at times. Looking at some of these lawns, I feel like I'm looking at a ball field with the intricate designs that have been mowed in. And the Adirondack chairs in the front are always a fun touch. Just another front gable, big picture window. I'm assuming it's a mudroom on the end, on the outside of the chimney there. And some folks have tried to update them, differing quality of outcomes. But it's an interesting neighborhood. Big picture window there. That one hasn't been restored too much, but there's probably a lot of opportunities to do some restoration work. Getting back to Charlotte in the 50s and just sort of what that whole era meant. So, I mean, we lose context, right? Looking back at it 75 years on, you know, when these neighborhoods were built, there was no such thing as rock and roll. Everyone still listened to jazz. They were primarily, it was a different culture. Let's just put it this way. It was a totally different culture. But the message wasn't in the music. It was just, from what I understand, the folks drank a lot more. And rightly so, maybe. I don't know. They were dealing with the realities of an industrial lifestyle, one that had gone through the pains and anguishes of the middle, in which the memory of the middle of the 20th century was very recent at the then time. And they overindulged. They consumed too much scotch. They all smoked like chimneys. And it reminds me of something that I read in The Onion when I was in college, which was, I'm not worried. My grandfather drank a glass of scotch and smoked a pack of cigarettes every day, and he lived until 60, which was old back then. And that pretty much sums up the mindset of the folks that built all of these homes. But here's Sheffield Park and the wagon road. It's there, it's deep, it's rutted into the clay, you can see it, and it's a historical touchstone for those that are trying to understand what infrastructure looked like in pre-automotive days. It's rustic. I mean, it's super rustic. The park itself is nice. Interesting places to play. And good slides. I think there's a nice swing set. And I forget the exact feature that's unique to Sheffield Park, but there is one. So we're in the other neighborhood now. We're in the Sedgefield Park neighborhood. The other side of the park, which we come up here, we see a big split level. I've been in some of these split levels too. I love them from a layout perspective. That big great room they have off the side, if they have an integrated kitchen and seating area and stuff, they really fit well even in the modern lifestyle that we have here in the 21st century. And we see an old person wrenching on the car. And that's cool to see, I guess. That's what brings you joy. Those cars didn't go too fast. Across the street we see another split level. This time a little different in layout and gabling. We don't see any of those integrated split levels where they just have like a single roof line. But those are in other neighborhoods. Look at this one across the street. I really get excited about a well-done mid-century. The challenge is adding density to these pre-existing neighborhoods. And you lose a lot of amenities in these neighborhoods that are isolated from density. You lose the ability to walk to bake shops and restaurants, and the ability to interact with other people and sort of socialize. Oh, look at this house. I love this house. This is fantastic. You lose the ability to socialize, and I think that's a huge loss. I think like if the folks knew in the 50s when they were laying these neighborhoods out that we would be losing that part of our culture, they would have thought about it much more deliberately. But there was a housing crisis in the inner cities, and they had to do something. So they had the ability to produce cars, and they produced cars, and they made highways, and they put these houses in. And the houses are very modest. These are modest homes. They're all typically around 1,600, 1,800 square feet. I think that in meterage is like 150 square meters or so. I think they might have 1.5 bathrooms. They basically are apartments. If you've ever lived in a city and you've lived in a nice apartment with 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, that's what these feel like, except they're not stacked on top of one another. They have a yard, they have a place to play. But again, it's not social. The kids aren't socializing. They're just going in the backyard. And families at this time were much bigger. It was common for my parents anyway to grow up with over 5 kids in their family. So you didn't necessarily need to go to a school or go to a park where kids could interact with other kids of their own age. They sort of just had their immediate siblings. It was just a different time. Here's an interesting piece looking up on the right. These two houses are nice. This one on the right, I just love how deep the overhangs are, and those 3 pieces of glass on the left, and the small windows just to let in light. I'm assuming into a bedroom on the right. And also the landscaping's fantastic. And here's a split level. Unrestored but maintained, tasteful use of brick, and the living area just really well elevated in a garrison over the sub basement, usually the cooler sub basement where the kids would play. And any walk I do, I just can't help but mention my Subaru. It's not my favorite, but I love it. That's not my Subaru, but I have a Subaru. My kids, it's designed for dogs. It's marketed for dog owners, but if you have young kids, I think they would be messier than small dogs. I remember cleaning Cheerios out of a headrest and thinking to myself, it defies the laws of physics. And Subarus are good because you don't care that the kids have gotten Cheerios because it's a Subaru, you know? It's just, anyway. More mid-century stuff on the right. You can kind of catch it. On our left is a school. I don't know what the ratings are. I don't know if it's good or not. That's the neighborhood school. There's a Montessori school around here on the other side of Independence called Chantilly Montessori. I think it's easier to get into than some of the Montessori schools on the south side of town, from what I've been told. And if you like that style of learning, that's also an option. But we're just walking on just a really well manicured sidewalk and a really verdant setting. But we'll start to notice what we're walking towards is the old Independence Boulevard, now the Independence Freeway. And you can probably hear the road noise if you watch the companion raw footage video where I'm not doing the voiceover. You can hear it, I think, starting now. And I think that's one of the factors that holds this neighborhood back is that the road noise from Independence is omnipresent and constant. If this neighborhood were to find itself in a situation where it could do something to mitigate that noise, then it could be very advantageous to anyone with a stake in having a low road noise existence while interacting with this neighborhood. So we're about to leave the frontage of the school property, and for now we haven't hit the high density area. It's still kind of low density, and there are still great examples of just fun architecture if you're looking, and you like just low slung buildings with really obtuse shapes, obtuse triangles. This is it. It's a neat feature on the front of this particular home with the wooden slatting. Assuming it was added after the fact, but it's just a nice nod to the mid-century design. That's the type of thing like I'd see on an apartment building, on a balcony or something, and put a smile on my face. Were it done correctly. And we can see this street has sort of like an old resort feel. I'd love to know the story with that particular driveway. That's for another day. It might be lost to time. Another interesting mid-century door with cool landscaping in the front. Nice red maple. They're beautiful. Just understated. And one of the cool things about all these sort of inner beltway 5,000 meter road beltway homes throughout Charlotte is that they're all kind of like this, right? And it's rolling, the terrain's rolling. So you notice here that it's hilly. So where we are is the North Carolina Piedmont. Piedmont means foothills. There's not a flat surface in Charlotte, not one. What strikes me about this house had an American flag, but rather than red, white, and blue, it was rainbows. But they really did a good job integrating the landscaping, the architecture with the landscaping, right around this 5,000 meter belt line. So we've turned, there's a mural that's documented in another video. So now we're entering, and then I turned onto what I believe is, I don't know what street it is, I'll go back and, but we can see where there's a tower. That tower has been variously abandoned, occupied. I think I don't know, it was built in the 50s when people were leaving the downtowns. It was speculative, I'm not sure whatever happened with it, but this whole street is almost like a frontage road for Independence Boulevard, which is Federal Highway 74. And for me anyway, it's easy to imagine a world in which on the left-hand side of the screen, which we can't see right now, but there's a lot of sort of less maintained housing that just gets, that gets repurposed, maybe rebuilt. Oh, look at this house though. Big picture windows. Look at that access trail to the front door too, that sweeping curve. Really beautiful, really nice. But again, you have the road noise. Were there sort of a larger edifice? So what I've noticed in Charlotte is that where there are apartment buildings that are 3 and 4 stories high, sort of the 5/1s or the 3/1s or whatever, and they front old federal highways or active federal highways. If there's a rail trail or a greenway or a sidewalk or anything on the other side of that building, what the building does is it acts as a noise barrier. It just blocks the sound. So for me, my fantasy, as I virtually stroll down the sidewalk, looking at these great pieces of architecture, is to imagine that across the street is some 3 or 4 story apartment building, good density, with the access roads fronting Independence and the Independence busway, light rail, whatever they end up selecting, and maybe with some lawn or green in front of it, wide sidewalks, but dense and large, but also noise blocking, so that on the other side of the street, where these beautiful sort of expressions of optimism exist, it's put back in that verdant setting, that peaceful setting that once existed in the bygone day. Whether or not that happens, who knows? It's to be determined. But a lot of potential, for sure. If they do develop any density, and it seems to me likely that they would, just given its proximity to the future planned transit corridor and all of the amenities that come with it, I hope that the city and the neighborhood work with any interested parties to make sure that whatever they build architecturally does it with a nod to what was there before it, which is playful and optimistic architecture that is integrated with this very lush landscape and is respectful of the contours of the earth and the needs of the people inside to have access to light and fresh air, while doing so in a manner that is appropriate for where we are globally 75 years later. But potential nods, if you look at color, you look at the glass, look at the color of this all blue. That's a fun blue. And I think there's a mint home coming up. So, there's a great example of just a low slung ranch. So simple, just just one flat roof line. And look at all those. So they have the shutters on them, simple colors. It's just, it takes like 20 minutes to walk past it, or 20 seconds to walk past it. It's a big walk. It's fantastic. And coming up here, there's going to be a mint home. That mint green, for whatever reason, I think 1950s when I look at it. I think that might be the original color. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but it's not garish, and it looks very faded. And it's not a common color these days. But there it is. I'm not sure my camera equipment does it justice. But go out and walk it if you have the opportunity and see it with your own eyes, unfiltered. It's not a bad walk. You won't regret it. You'll feel good afterward. There's a bunch of places on Central. You can get some cuisine from pretty much any ethnicity of the world that you want to get is on Central. Independence is, if you want to buy, Independence has got a long way to go. I'm just going to leave it at that. But it could be, has a lot of potential. Here's another one from the 50s. This isn't it has a hip roof. The hip roof looks good too. I don't know. I guess it's just personal preference. Do you like the unhipped roof or the hip roof? I kind of like the unhipped roof. I think it's a statement. It's like simple, simplicity, minimalism. It's the type of roof that if you had to replace it, you might be able to do it with some of your buddies in a case of beer. Whereas those hip roofs, once you start introducing the curves and the angles, it increases the complexity. So on the right, we're looking at sort of just a cleared out area. And on the left, we have some more just dense, I think these are duplexes. They might be uniplexes. And a nice wood lot. I mean, it's nice with all those trees and stuff being there. But on the right, you'll see there's cleared out, just sort of empty lots. And my guess is that there may have been homes there that were subsequently cleared out by the city. Property remediation effort. My guess is that in gully washer events, the insurers got sick of paying for it, so they just condemned them. And now there's a cool little park area, or green area anyway, which is nice lungs for the city. It probably does a great job doing natural abatement work as well, and it doesn't take much to maintain it. So it's one of those win-wins that you get when nature and civilization coexist in close proximity to one another. Here we see a 20 mile per hour. That's roughly 30,000 meters an hour, 32,000 meters an hour. It's about as fast as my electric bicycle will go, and that's fast enough for me. I'll tell you what. I get around town, lickety split, and I never really worry about injuring myself too badly at that speed. So I'm glad to see contextually appropriate traffic directives being posted. This is the more historic Eastway Park. I'll do this at some other day. Here we see Dresden. There's Dresden Road West and Dresden Road East. And I mean, a lot to unpack there. And it frankly scares me. I don't know if I want to touch it. But the homes there are even more modest. I think that's like the first neighborhood they did, maybe even in the late 40s or early 50s. Whereas where we walked today was mid 50s, maybe even into the 60s. But, it's a nice loop, nice place to run. If you're in Plaza, or if you're just in town and you want to go see something different, you want to see what the middle of the last century looked like, you can still find it. It's still untouched. This is where it is. You have to take a car to get out here, or some sort of transportation. You can't do it on foot. But you need some sort of auxiliary power. And but if you do make it out here, it's peaceful. Check you later.